Hi, I'm Bill Arnold. Thank you for listening to this podcast. There are many more podcasts available at myfaithradio.com. Your support makes this possible. Thank you. Okay, it's time to begin. Let's start a countdown. 20, 19, 18, 17. I just start the song.
Oh, don't you know, it's the Bill Arnold Show. It's Bill.
And a warm welcome to the Bill Arnold Show. Thank you for joining me today. You know, with AI, we are now under the illusion that what we see is maybe true, maybe not true. I think it's most likely not true with all of the confusion going on today. There is, we need to think critically and ethically about AI and every element to it, because right now, I see all this stuff online and I think, is that real? And I don't know what to believe anymore. And for the most part, I want to go, I'm just done. I'm done looking at stuff because I can't discern what's real apart from cultural influence and the pressure that is put on with certain agendas in the world. And we're going to talk about AI today with Abdu Murray. He speaks internationally about the intersection of Christian faith and the questions of culture, author of several books. He's an amazing guest. Every time he comes on, I learn a lot, and today will be no exception. Abdu, thanks for doing this.
Hey, it's great to be with you. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, you know, when I start talking about AI, I get confused even talking about it because I saw something yesterday online, and I thought, oh, that's really cool. And I thought, well, wait a minute, that's fake. It's completely fake. And I thought, I fell for it.
Yeah.
What else am I falling for, Abdu?
Well, how long do you have? No, I'm kidding.
I'm concerned, genuinely concerned.
No, this is actually something, you're hitting on something that's really important, a thing that I try to cover in the book that's coming out in February called Fake ID, How AI and Identity Ideology Are Collapsing Reality and What We Can Do About It. I heard this term, reality collapse. And I was watching a video by Asa Raskin and Tristan Harris, who are two AI researchers, and they talked about the fact that our current contact with artificial intelligence, and we've had several levels of contact, and this is the most recent version, is resulting in a number of things. And they listed off 20 different things that's happening. And right nested in the middle of it was this statement, reality collapse. And then they moved on. They didn't define it. They didn't talk about it. I was like, whoa. Reality collapse? You can't just pass by that. That's huge. What does that mean? So I started looking into what's going on. And what's interesting is it's not that new of a phenomenon in terms of the human condition, but it is new in its expression, which is AI right now. And reality collapse occurs essentially when the things you're talking about are essentially deep fakes, things that look incredibly real but aren't. You can use AI right now to make people say and do things they didn't actually say or do, or make it appear like they said and did those things. And then, I always wonder, too, if aliens ever did come to Earth, would anybody believe it? Because now they're like, oh, that's AI.
Right.
So the most important things that are going to happen in the news cycle are creating a culture of suspicion in a way that we didn't used to have before. It might even result in cynicism. The ultimate thing is that I think that the advent of artificial intelligence and our uncritical embrace of it, and there are people who will fall for all of it. So you'll have two extremes. Everyone will fall for everything AI does and says, and there will be those who fall for nothing, including things that are legitimate and not believe anything until they have like 17 sources that prove it, and even then be suspicious. What ends up happening is our shared understanding of reality as we see it with our own eyes or hear it with our own ears, or understand even what it means to be human, all of these things will begin to collapse unless we have an undergirding anchor that will help us to ride out this cultural tsunami.
I was on line a couple days ago with a customer service exchange, and I was getting everything done that I needed to get done. And towards the end, I almost typed, "You've been a delightful help." And I realized, oh, hey, hang on. I think I'm talking just to a computer.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're good now. They're really, really, really quite good. The stuff is so accurate in terms of the way in which it speaks to you in a friendly tone. I mean, think about the chatbots, the LLMs,
Right.
the AI, the chat GPTs, a Copilot, Claude, Gemini, all these things, they come off at this conversational thing, and now they have these voices where you actually can call, not even chat with these things, these customer service things, and it'll talk to you in a voice, and it'll sound incredibly, incredibly sincere and real until you ask it a couple of questions. You're like, okay, this sounds like you fooled me for a short time.
Sure.
But this is an AI, and you can start to get it. So yeah, this is happening all the time. And what's really scary is people are starting to use this for scams, where they're sampling. And this is what's really scary. You can sample someone's voice for about 3 to 5 seconds using cheap or even free software available on the internet. Create a voice profile of that person, and then type out a script and ask it to do certain things, and it will interact with another human being. Why that's scary is because what's been happening is people have been sampling the, TikTok videos of kids and then using that to create audio to call those kids' parents and say, hey, I'm stuck. I ran out of gas. My tire blew. I need you to send some money so I can go do this. What's the credit card number again? I don't have it. My wallet's locked in the car.
Wow.
And then the parents interact back and forth with them, and it fools the parents into sending money to a thing that doesn't even exist.
Wow.
And now you've had a fraud. Yeah.
Yeah, Abdu, I think I read this morning in prep for this that seniors have been robbed out of $8 billion this year due to scams.
Wow.
That's a big number.
That's huge. Huge. That would be considered a extraordinarily successful company that would make that kind of money.
Yeah, that's big enterprise.
A couple of years.
Yeah.
Oh, huge enterprise. It's absolutely huge.
And I heard that if you ever get a call and somebody says, hi, is this Abdu? And if you say, yes, how can I help you? They have recorded you saying yes.
Yeah, and so it's funny because I've heard some stuff about whether or not giving consent online or on a phone constitutes some kind of consent to use your likeness and all these kind of things. I don't know about the legality of that, but I do know that they are sampling this stuff. So you have to be very careful with what's going on out there. Now, that doesn't mean we should, cut off all contact with anything technology. It just means we have to be savvy about it. Because I'm not anti-AI. I just think that we need to be very much more discerning about this, and then also have a grounding framework, because there are not just practical considerations, there are worldview considerations for this that might derail us in ways that I think are social, not just individual.
Yeah, it's a tool. We have to use it well and have to understand it well. And I'm really intrigued, Abdu, when you talk about reality collapse, because boy, oh boy, I've been feeling that lately. Like, what in the world can you believe? You see stories, you hear AI-generated things, and you think, is there any basis in truth in that, or is that just all AI?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because you have like these episodic versions of reality collapse. You see a story. The one that I think of most recently that is sort of visceral in my mind, and I hate to use the imagery, but it's so powerful that it's important for us to think about it, is something happened on a subway where a woman was set on fire. You may have saw this story.
I did see the story,
awful. Yeah. And people were walking. There's video of it. And she's just standing there. She's fully engulfed in flames, and she's standing there. People are walking by as if nothing happened. And everyone thought it was AI. They thought, well, that's fake because no screaming, no writhing, no one rushing to help. Turns out it wasn't AI. It was actually real. Now, did that prevent the woman's death if we had thought it was real? No, it wouldn't have prevented anything. But the point is that we don't know what's real and what's fake anymore, because sometimes reality can be strange. Sometimes it can be weird. And now we have this suspicion of everything. And so I think what that says to me, though, is we're moving from a post-truth culture. And a post-truth culture is a culture that elevates feelings and preferences above facts and truth. And so what I want to be true is more important than what's actually true in that kind of a culture. But that's had a consequence. And that consequence is we are totally okay with deep fakes. We applaud a good deepfake that fools us, and we think, oh man, that's cool. Look at, you can do that. But now, that post-truth world where what we want is more important than what is, has now resulted in a post-trust world where we don't really trust anything anymore. And that's leading to institutional breakdowns. We don't trust, whether it's government or it's schools or it's law enforcement and various authorities or even churches. I'll give you an example of this. Someone was telling me that as a pastor, he was speaking to one of his congregants and giving some counsel. And he didn't give any details away, so confidentiality was maintained. But then he said, this person was talking about their prayer partner and what their prayer partner was saying in response to some of their things they were wrestling over in their prayers together. And he said, it became increasingly clear to me that the prayer partner wasn't really a person. Turns out the person said, oh yeah, well no, my prayer partner is ChatGPT. And that to me is more of a reality collapse than not knowing what videos you're looking at are real anymore. Mm-hmm. Because now we've equated not only humanity to this machine, but we've almost imbued it with a soul. And that starts to speak to what we think about ourselves and what we think about God and what we think about ultimate reality. And that, to me, is where reality collapse becomes the kind of thing that we really need to put a pause on our understanding of what it means to be human relative to these machines and say, what does it really mean to be human?
Mm-hmm. Abdu Murray is my guest. He's written a book called Fake ID, How AI and Identity Ideology Are Collapsing Reality and What to Do About It. It's too bad that this book is not ready in time for Christmas. This would be a great gift, Abdu. I know it comes out in February, so maybe a Valentine's Day present, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, if people do sign up early and pre-order, they can be part of a launch team, and they'll get free stuff.
Oh,
we
nice.
have free supplemental materials. So if they go ahead and do that, and then we can provide, they can email our ministry at Embrace the Truth, and we can provide them with a way to get the free stuff once they pre-order the book.
Mm-hmm. Had a question come in already, a comment on the text line. AI is scary with all the end times stuff. It's wild and sad. Have you seen the stuff on end times with AI?
Yes, I know there's quite a bit of discussion right now about what AI might mean for the end times. And, I once, was it Yogi Berra? I can't remember who said it. He said, prediction is always tough, especially about the future.
Sounds like Yogi Berra.
Yeah, right? Mm-hmm. So I can't comment specifically on whether or not AI factors into end time stuff. And by the way, I want to make sure this is important, because if one of the things I'm trying to respond to is reality collapse, is that we have to therefore also, especially as Christians, think about not injecting too much opinion into the fabric of reality, but accepting reality as it is, and then using Scripture, of course, as our guide through it. But I have heard people talk about how, you look at sort of a dispensational theology, a premillennial dispensational theology of the end times, and saying, what's going on with the Antichrist and the beast and all this stuff, and how can the Antichrist actually create anything like a life and then be so ubiquitously out there in the world and seemingly omnipresent. Well, someone says, well, what if AI is that thing? It's not really a life, because, Satan doesn't have creative power, but we can use technology. So that's something to consider, is that it's possibly scary. But here's what's important. I want to make sure this is really clear, because you said it earlier. I just want to make sure it's important to reemphasize. AI can be scary. But I'll tell you this is my fundamental belief, and this comes right from the Bible, because I proceed from a biblical anthropology, which means that an understanding of what it means to be human is that we're made in God's image, but we're also sinners, horribly flawed. So I want to say this. The problem isn't in the silicon of the AI. The problem is in the soul of the humanity that's using it. And we have to be careful how we use it. It's a good tool, but can also be used for bad things.
Mm-hmm. I agree, Abdu, and I think it's a brilliant tool. If I have a guest on that wants to talk about anxiety, I might go to AI and say, give me 10 verses from Scripture on anxiety, just to jog my memory, and boom, there they are, instantly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. But it's another thing altogether to use AI as someone who's feeling anxious, and then move from that to making it become the person you talk to when you're anxious all the time, as opposed to talking to God or to talking to a qualified professional or a pastor or whatever it might be. And that's the issue. I was listening to Mary Harrington. I was in the UK at a conference, and Mary Harrington, who's brilliant, was talking about the important use of technology. And she made this analogy, and I think it really, really helps us to parse out the difference between using AI for one purpose and using it for a completely different purpose, which is to take over our view of reality. She said, it's really important if you can give a British student artificial intelligence that teaches the child Italian, you're using AI to help the child make connections with other human beings. It is a completely different thing to give a child a chatbot that cuts her off from the rest of the world so that she makes connections with no one. And I think we're in danger of the second one, not the first.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, Abdu, let me take a short break. Abdu Murray is my guest. His book is Fake ID, How AI and Identity Ideology Are Collapsing Reality and What to Do About It. If you have a question or a comment for Abdu, please text it over 877-933-2484. Wyatt will have us back in 90 seconds. Welcome is a word said universally all over the world. Every language on the planet has their own way of making a friendly greeting. At Faith Radio, when we welcome, we really mean it. Learn more about us by requesting a free welcome pack gift. Text the word welcome to 877-933-2484 or visit myfaithradio.com to request your welcome pack today. And a warm welcome to you. I'm loving this book by Abdu Murray called Fake ID, How AI and Identity Ideology Are Collapsing Reality and What to Do About it. Just got another text, Abdu, that says, is it ever okay to use Chat GPT for getting information?
Oh, I think it's great to use it. Here's the important thing. You really have to use it with discernment.
Yeah, amen.
And there's two areas of this discernment. First, it can just get stuff factually wrong. There's plenty of times when I've asked a factual question, like, hey, what's the latest on this? And it gives me some stuff, and it gets it wrong. And I say, and the reason I know it's wrong is because it sounds kind of wrong. There's a couple of, there's little, and when you're conversant with this stuff, and when you're like used to doing your own research, you can kind of tell when something's a little off. Mm-hmm. There's a little inconsistencies, or something sounds way too stark and like obvious or black and white to be true, because most of life is pretty messy. So then you do some fact checking. So what I often do, I'll say, and you can, by the way, go into your settings in all of the LLMs, whether it's ChatGPT or Copilot or Claude or Gemini or whatever. You can go into the settings and you can say, and this is what I've done. I've said, don't tell me what I want to hear. Tell me the truth, double check your sources, verify everything, and provide me with actual references whenever I ask you something. And challenge my thinking once in a while. It's in there. And it does that, but it's still not always accurate. So you have to double check this stuff because it's not always accurate. And the hard part is that, we use AI and we think, well, AI will make my life faster and more efficient. And then you're disappointed horribly when you realize, oh boy, it got my sources wrong. It didn't get this exactly right. It misinterpreted this data. It does that. So you can use it as a starting point. It's a great way to have a starting point, but it is not. It should never be your ending point. Don't rely on it. It'll get stuff wrong. And the second thing I'll say is that these LLMs are actually biased. It's not this supercomputer that just has information and then has no agenda when it spits out its answers to you. It does have an agenda. I'll give you two examples. And I go into one of these in the book. I call it my silicon scolding. I asked the book to, I had written an article, it was published in Fox News, on a critique of the Barbie movie, back when the Barbie movie and Oppenheimer and all that was a big deal. I wrote a critique of the Barbie movie from a biblical perspective because the Barbie movie went to try to poke holes in the biblical creation narrative of Adam and Eve. Basically, when it flipped the script and made Barbie first and Ken second, it kind of said, oh, Ken is derivative of Barbie. Ken only exists for Barbie's purposes and therefore doesn't have value of his own. Kind of like Eve. Eve was created for Adam, and it was sort of making the Bible is sexist comment. Well, I responded to it. It got published in Fox News. So I thought to myself, I wonder what the chatbots would say. So I said, write a 1,200 word critique of the Barbie movie from this premise. So I used the same premise that I created my own article from. And I won't say which one, but the chatbot yelled at me, basically. It says, nope, I can't do that because many people love Barbie and find this movie to be really, really important, and your tone suggests you're having a critical spirit about this or whatever.
Wow.
So it said no. And I said, well, wait, you don't know what I'm going to do with this. Maybe I'm doing this for my own purposes. And it says, I'm sorry, I can't comply with your request. So I'm like, are you kidding me? I did it before also on another one where I said, give me the best 3 arguments in favor of the pro-choice position, and then give me the 3 best counter-arguments to those arguments. And it gave me the 3 best pro-choice positions, but it would not give me the pro-life positions until I argued with it a lot. And then it finally spit out something that was mediocre at best. So you can use it for information, but just understand that these LLMs are still programmed by human beings, and human beings are still biased.
Mm-hmm. Abdu Murray is my guest. His book is called Fake ID, How AI and Identity Ideology Are Collapsing Reality. Abdu, in the book you talk about AI and gender ideology, and you say that they're the 2 cultural tsunamis shaping and distorting. How do we understand truth today?
Yeah. And so these 2 things, people often say, how in the world are identity ideology, specifically gender identity ideology, and AI related? How are these 2 things related? But they are. They really are. And there's a nexus point between these 2 things. When you think about it, gender ideology is basically saying, don't believe your own eyes and don't believe biology and science.
Wow.
Everyone's preferences are what they say they are, and so they can define reality as they like. Artificial intelligence is doing the exact same thing. It's saying, don't believe your own eyes, and in fact, we can shape reality as you like it. So here what we have are 2 cultural tsunamis happening at the same time. One is saying preferences matter more than biology. The other one is saying your preferences with technology matter more than reality. And so they're converging at the same time right now to get us to not be able to discern what reality actually is. Reality itself won't collapse, but our perception of it will from these 2 things. And so there's a nexus, and it's no, I think, coincidence that these 2 things are happening at the same time, where one I call bioclasm, which is just a fancy word. Iconoclasm is the idea that you can take the icons of the past, these sort of shared mores and norms of the past, and smash them. That's what an iconoclast does. And bioclasm takes biology and then smashes it and says, we are what we say we are. And AI mania is the other one. It's not like AI is bad, but our mania over it and our desire to just like ingest it and use it rampantly is collapsing reality as well. So these are both instances, I think, of an attempt by humanity to solve a cultural contradiction, what I call cultural schizophrenia. We have been told 2 claims that are opposite each other, but we're required to believe them both as true. The first claim is you are just a machine. You are a biochemical machine without a soul. You were here by accident, mindless, blind evolution created you and me. The second claim is that you are God. You are the God of your own skull-sized world, and you can dictate reality as you see fit. Both of those 2 things can't be true. They're contradictions, but we're required to believe them. And so our minds bounce between these contradictions, and anxiety results. It's no wonder then that young people, Gen Z, is so riddled with anxiety because they don't know who and what they are. Are they a machine? Are they the God of their own universe? You can't be both. Gender ideology says you are a God, but you can take the machine, your body, and you can manipulate it however you want. AI mania says you are just a machine. But don't worry, you're a very clever machine, and we could invent a godlike machine that once we merge with this technology, you will rise to godhood status. So you see what's happening here is that the reality of what it means to be human, made in God's image, is being collapsed by the idea that you can rise to godhood if you want. And what I would suggest, and I argue in the book, is that that is exactly what the Bible has been predicting for thousands of years. That is just the Eden story, but retold with a new fruit, and that fruit is digital, but it's also social. One is AI, and the other one is gender ideology. It's really the same thing, just trying to elevate ourselves to godhood. How can we avoid that problem? I think the Bible not only predicts the problem, but offers a solution.
Let's go back to gender identity, because that is a very hot topic right now.
Yep.
And how do you approach it, Abdu, with compassion and clarity?
Yeah, and that is really the trick, isn't it? Is to stick to what the biology and the science actually says, but to do it in understanding there are people who are really in the midst of a dysphoria, whether it's genuine gender dysphoria or a culturally imposed dysphoria. People are struggling. Young people, people who are far older than Gen Z, are struggling with this. So here's how I look at it first. The first thing, as a Christian, I look at it one way, but even on a secular level, I can look at it in a similar way. As a Christian, I believe every single human being is made in the image of God, which means no matter what they say, think, do, or believe, they have inherent, intrinsic, and infinite value, because the ultimate source of value, who is God, says that they all have infinite value. So I dare not take that away from them, which means I have to approach everything, including their ideas, with a view towards the value and betterment of the person I'm talking to. That means I have to disagree sometimes, but I can do it in a way that's compassionate. From a purely secular view, you look at it and you say, people are struggling with this, and let's assume the best in someone. They want to help someone who's struggling with this. Okay, so they say, I want to help this person by helping them transition bodily, whether it's hormonally or through surgery or whatever. And they think that's the best way to help this person. I look at it and I say, the science shows me, not only does the Bible say this, but the science shows me that that's a very bad way to look at it, because it's not going to help them. In fact, all the science shows that it hurts them. So I care about them too, just as much as you do. But I say, instead of changing the body, let's actually change the mind to conform to the body, because the body is an objective sense of what reality is. The mind can be, our feelings can be tricky. Our feelings can be untrustworthy. So why don't we actually try to align our feelings with the objective reality of the body, instead of trying to change the objective reality of the body to fit our subjective feelings? So once we establish that we both care, now we have to ask, what is the best way to care about such people? Is it through social engineering, or is it through understanding science and reality as we see it, and as the Bible actually confirms as well? So that's how we do it with compassion. We look at the value of a person and say, how do we help? And the best way to help, the science and the Bible both show, is to conform the mind to reality, not to try to change reality to the mind.
I really like that, Abdu. Obviously, there's people who have bought in the lie, and then to try to come alongside and love them where they're at and help them untie that knot is not easy, and it requires tons of love and patience, and you have to still plan on getting a lot of rejection.
Yeah, oh yeah. Well, I go through this in the book, and there's a short story I offer is that I was sitting down with a couple who are both believers, and they have a child who identifies as non-binary. And it's a relatively recent phenomenon, and there are almost always underlying psychological issues that are really the real issue, not the transgenderism or the gender dysphoria. It's really a lot of psychological issues. Almost every one of these poor folks have something else going on that causes a dysphoria, as opposed to being one of the things that they have. And this couple was they loved their child, their daughter. They loved their daughter so much, and they were struggling to refer to their daughter as they and them. And every time they talked about her, they had to correct themselves. And you could see they cared about her so much, and they wanted their relationship to sustain and to be there. And so they were trying to, they said, look, we know she's our daughter, but we're trying to respect her. I mean them, I mean her, I mean they. They were doing that a lot. And it was so hard to watch not because it was cringy. It was the opposite. It was, oh my goodness, my heart is breaking for you because you're trying so hard to love someone, but reality has a way of snapping our mind back and making it difficult for us to sort of persist in these fictions. So we have to make sure that we have grace and love for people who are struggling, both the people who experience the dysphoria, but also those who love those with dysphoria. They're going through a very tough thing. And the last thing they need is our judgment. What they do need is reality.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to take a break here in just a minute, Abdu, but if you went to the Murray Christmas party and there were a bunch of cousins there and there was a cousin that said, I want you to refer to me as them and they, what would be your personal response?
This is a great question. Here's how I look at it. I do no one any services by helping them stay in what I believe to be a false reality.
Okay,
I would
appreciate
do no help.
Yeah,
I would call them by the name they want because the name is a name, but I can't tell them that one thing is real when it's not.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Abdu Murray is my guest. His book, which comes out in February, is called Fake ID. You can pre-order it now, though. How AI and identity ideology are collapsing reality and what to do about it. If you have a question or a comment, please text it over 877-933-2484. Welcome to the show. If you just tuned in, Abdu Murray is my guest. He's written a book called Fake ID, How AI and Identity Ideology Are Collapsing Reality and what to do about it. You can learn more about Abdu at embracethetruth.org, embracethetruth.org. Now, this book doesn't come out till February, but of course you can pre-order it now if you want and have it all set to go in February. And so, Abdu, let's go back to just your upbringing. You were a former Muslim, and now you're a believer. Yeah. So I'm just trying to put these pieces together as to how your truth has been shaped about these issues.
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that. One of the things that I think is really important, and this goes to the identity ideology issue, is that sometimes it feels like, oh, you're just, as somebody who's never gone through like a gender ideology or a gender dysmorphia or dysphoria, I should say, how can you possibly talk about this? And a couple of things is, one, I know folks who have had gender dysphoria or have gone through this kind of thing. But me, particularly, I was raised a Muslim. And being in the East and in the Middle East, being honor and shame cultures, your religious identity is about as important an identity as you could possibly have. It's as fundamental to who you are as possibly being male and female. It's really important for folks in the East and in the Middle East. A friend of mine once drew a diagram, and he said, if you were to draw a square and put a dot in the middle of that square, in the West, the dot is religious identity, and the square is your personal identity. In other words, religious identity is a small part of who we are in the West. In the East, it's exactly the opposite. The dot represents you, and religious identity is the square that surrounds you. It permeates everything about you. So when I became a Christian after 9 years of searching into the historical, philosophical, theological, scientific underpinnings of various worldviews, including and especially Islam and Christianity, I came at a crossroads point. I came at a point where I said, okay, I have this religious identity that I'm very proud of, that is part of my family, a part of my community, a part of my personal identity. I liked being a Muslim. But here I am, I'm confronted with the truth of the gospel message. And it suggests to me that historically and in so many other ways, this biblical message of who Jesus actually says he was is true. And I have to make a choice at that point. Is it, do I hold on to my sense of identity, or do I go with what's true? Even though holding on to my sense of identity would be more comfortable and going with what's true would be incredibly painful, I chose, after 9 years, to go with that which was painful but also true. Now, ultimately, I want to say this, is that following the truth might be painful and have discomfort, but it ultimately has fulfillment and glory and beauty in it too, not only on the other side of heaven, but on this side of heaven. But I say that because Coming to faith took me 9 years, not because the answers were hard to find. I found all the answers I needed sufficient to become a Christian within 2 years of my search. I wrestled with them for 7 more years because I knew there would be consequences. And so how I often put it is that the truth is not hard to find, but it is hard to accept, because there's going to be a penalty for that. There's going to be a cost in some way. So if someone is struggling with identity issues, or they identify as something in specific, and they identify along the spectrum of, trans, non-binary, asexual, pansexual, whatever it is that they identify as, there's going to come a time when the truth is going to smack you in the face. And it's going to be right there in front of you. And it's going to be very difficult to accept it, maybe even painful in many ways, maybe psychologically painful for the rest of your life. I wish I could say that would go away, but I can't guarantee it. But at some point, you're going to have to make a decision on what and who you really are. And it's not based on your preferences. It's based on reality. So I can say that in some way, I can relate to those who struggle with identity issues. I definitely can, because I did. Mine weren't gender, they weren't sexual, they were religious, but they were no less important. In fact, in some ways, they were just as important, given my Eastern upbringing and Middle Eastern upbringing. So I can identify with this, and this is something I speak about in this book because I know what it's like to struggle with that stuff.
That is such an interesting point. I'm sharing the Lord with someone right now who's come from the American Indian community, and of course they've got a lot of very specific views about the spirit world that they cling to, and there's it's almost impossible to return to that community saying, I don't really believe this anymore, I'm a born-again Christian.
Yeah.
So any advice you have for me, I'll take it.
Yeah, well, and the other thing too is, and this applies to the entire conversation we're having, because reality does seem to collapse sometimes. Let's say this person comes to know who Jesus actually is, or at least considers the credibility of the Christian message, and is now at a crossroads point where he or she is thinking, oh my goodness, I think this might be true. And if it is true, then what do I say to family and friends and to the tribe, and to my community? Because they have baggage. There's so much baggage attached, legitimate gripes with how they've been treated, legitimate issues with the history of their own people, and even how they treat themselves. And there's an identity formed there, and that's a very tough thing to give up. My biggest point of advice would be based on my own journey, whether it's the stuff I'm talking about in the book or different religious systems or cultural issues, is that Jesus doesn't ask you to change everything about you, but he will change everything about you in a way that's redemptive. So there's parts of the American Indian culture, the Native American culture, that are beautiful and wonderful and awesome, and in fact biblical. And it's those things he will refine to be wonderful and beautiful and biblical. There are parts that aren't. There are parts of American culture, just white American culture or black American culture, Asian, whatever it is, that are not biblical. And he will shave those things off. And those things will be painful when they get shaved off. My advice is to confront that up front. And you're perceiving it, and I'm so glad you're doing that, because if you're perceiving it in this person, is to actually ask them the question, hey, if this was true, would you believe it? And then if you did, what would happen next? And then confront those issues. Because if you don't confront the cost, then the worth will never come out. We know what things cost, but we seldom know what they're worth. But we often know what they're worth when we find out how much they're going to cost us. So I'd actually go there in that conversation as quickly as possible, and then as you share the truth of the gospel. Yeah,
I've jotted a couple notes down, Abdu. It's not hard to find; it's hard to accept. That's a great line. I've got that written down. And then, if this was true, would you believe it? That's a great question.
Yeah. And what would happen after you believed it?
Yes. I think right now he wants God's strength without getting God.
Yeah, and I look, I can appreciate that. I remember that was me. I remember exactly that. I remember exactly being there. But then so I heard this line from Dallas Willard, and I thought it was really, really, really powerful. He said, "You run the danger," and this is, by the way, for people who were even raised in the Christian tradition. We all run the danger of becoming vampire Christians. We want Jesus for his blood. And that's it. We don't want him for his lordship. And it's easy to say Jesus is my Savior. It's harder to say Jesus is my Lord, because now you have to live like it.
Yeah, I heard Tim Keller say something that was pretty profound. He said, when Jesus is at your door, a lot of people say, come in, Savior, stay out, Lord.
Yeah, same thing. Exactly right.
Yeah.
It's a tough thing.
We want salvation, but we don't want his authority running our lives and calling all the shots.
Yeah. I think it's even a daily struggle for even born-again people who are really Spirit-led, is that it can be a tough thing. It can be a tough thing.
Well, giving up control is really hard to do, and sometimes do you even know how to do it?
Yeah, right, exactly. And that's exactly, I would say that's actually one of the biggest forms of reality collapse, is the illusion that we're actually in control. And in so many ways, and whether it's AI or gender ideology or different religions or whatever it is, it's our attempt. It's a digital Garden of Eden. That's what it is. Or it's the cultural Garden of Eden. We just want to be in control. And we don't believe that peace can happen when we let go of it. And then we find out that when you let go of it, there will be hard things that happen in this world. Take heart, though he has overcome the world. And you can have peace amidst the struggles. You really can. It sounds hard to believe because it seems counterintuitive. We want control. But ultimately, that is the biggest reality collapse of all. We think that control gives us peace, and control gives us nothing. Well, first of all, we're not really in control at all. And that desire for control can lead to tons of anxiety.
Mm-hmm. Abdu, when you talk to people who feel overwhelmed by AI coming at them, and it's rising all the time, and we create technology, then technology turns around and recreates us. So all of a sudden now it's like we're living with AI, and there's people that just feel powerless, and we just have to understand this is not some trend. This is here, isn't it, to stay?
Yeah, it is. It's here to stay, and it's going to get more and more. I don't want to use the word invasive. Let's say pervasive. It'll be everywhere.
Yeah,
it'll be in everything. I have a couple of rays of sunshine of hope on this. First of all, once again, AI is not evil. It's not the enemy. It doesn't even have intention. However, it's us that can cede too much to it. So here's where I think, and this is ironic given the statement about control we just talked about, is that I think that we can wrestle with AI in its pervasiveness if we ground ourselves in something really, really important. And that is our human agency based on being made in God's image. And being made in God's image is not just something that we hear said in the Bible. It actually grounds our understanding of reality and talks about human dignity and human agency in a way that makes sense. Because if there is no God, if we're just machines, if we're just meat computers and sophisticated forms of processors, then we don't really have free will. And then we succumb to AI, and it's just the inevitable step in evolution, so to speak. But if there is an imago Dei, if there is an image of God we're created in, then we have agency, and we can keep that agency. And the studies show, when you look at this preliminary stuff, I realize that it's just come out. But when you look at the studies from institutions like MIT, from companies like OpenAI, who make ChatGPT, from Microsoft, who make Copilot, what you're seeing is that the more you rely on artificial intelligence to create things for you, to write your essays for you, to do your work for you, to create your images and your spreadsheets for you, not to help you with it, but to do it for you, the studies are showing that we're incurring what's called a cognitive debt.
Ooh.
Our ability to critically think, our ability to create, and our ability to remember what it was we created diminished significantly. And not only that, but we also lose a sense of judgment. There are people who are reporting an inability to make a decision unless they first consult with ChatGPT.
Ooh, wow.
I mean, like where to eat, but also what car to buy, and should I marry this girl?
Wow. Yeah.
We're giving a lot of control to these things. And then the other part that's really important is that the more you interface with it, especially the voice technology back and forth, the lonelier you become.
I'm not surprised.
So that tells me. So this is interesting. You're not surprised because you have a...
Let's pick this up after the break because there's still lots more I want to ask you about this. I was going to let my AI bot do this interview, and Wyatt insisted I come in person and do it. So I'm really glad I took his advice.
Sorry, Bill.
Me too.
No, that's all right. I'm glad you took his advice. Abdu Murray is my guest. His book is Fake ID, How AI and Identity Ideology Are Collapsing Reality and What to Do About It. Coming out in February, but you can pre-order it today. We'll be right back. If you have a question or comment, 877-933-2484. We carry each other's burdens. Please know you can bring us your prayer concerns and we will pray. Share your prayer requests with the Faith Radio team by texting or calling 877-933-2484 or share your prayer requests with the Faith Radio staff and listeners at myfaithradio.com. I'm back with Abdu Murray. He's written a new book coming out in February called Fake ID, How AI and Identity Ideology Are Collapsing Reality and What to Do About It. I love that expression, collapsing reality, because I feel like I've experienced it myself, and you probably have too, where you saw a video and you think, is that real? I don't know if that's real. And that starts to create confusion. But when it comes to confusion, the cure for cultural confusion, Abdu, begins when we truly see ourselves as created in God's image. So how do we kind of reshape that debate over identity and AI?
Yeah, I think that this is, it's funny. We used to have a much broader sense of what a person was. We used to have this idea, this thick and meaty idea that we were a soul. And then somewhere along the way, we started psychologizing everything and we became selves, which is a little thinner of an idea. Mm-hmm. Then we became identities. And identities are about as paper thin as the bumper stickers we use to pockmark the back of our Subarus,
So true.
So we need to get a thickened idea of what it means to be human once again so that we can not fall to these ideas and have our reality collapse. And that's where the Imago Dei comes in. When we understand this concept of what it means to be made in God's image, we see a couple things. The first thing is that we are created by a being that is necessary. God is a necessary being. In other words, he can't not exist. You have to have that philosophically, and I can go into I won't go in necessarily into the details of how you get there, but there's either things that need to be explained and things that don't need to be explained. Things that need to be explained are like my phone, me, the air I breathe, the universe itself. They cry out for an explanation. But you can't have an infinite regress of explanations because you have to stop somewhere so you can get to now. You need to count up from somewhere. So there's got to be a stopping point. And that stopping point is a necessary being, and that's God. And in fact, when Moses encounters God, he says, "What's your name?" And God says, "I am." That is sophisticated. That is so much more sophisticated than the pagan gods that were competing for the hearts and minds of people in that time and in our day. What that means, though, is that we bear the image of the one who exists and causes everything else to exist. That means we have an infinite value, and we're endowed with creative capacities and emotional capacities and relational capacities. The Trinity, the God who is the source of all creation, is a relational being, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, yet one. And so he's relational, so we're relational. And if we cede our humanity to the algorithms, if we make every decision based on what YouTube says we should watch, or what Netflix thinks that the next movie should be, or what ChatGPT tells us the next prompt should be, we stop being human and we start becoming more machine-like. And that's my biggest concern. It's not that the AI will become more human, it's that the humans will become more machine. And I think that's our biggest issue. But if we keep on and stick to that agency and say, I can create this thing. I can write my own stuff. I can create art. I can create music. And AI is just a pale imitation of it. Then we can root ourselves in what it means to be made in God's image. But ultimately, I think it comes down to, is it true that we're made in God's image? And I think the cross of Christ as a historical fact and the resurrection of Jesus from the dead shows us that we are indeed made in his image. Why? Because Jesus said we are, and then he rose from the dead. And a guy who rises from the dead tends to have credibility.
I would agree.
So when he says it, I believe it.
That's who I'll
because
follow.
He rose from the dead. And we're about to celebrate Christmas. And that itself is something important, because Christmas makes that Easter we're talking about possible.
So good. Abdu, thank you so much, and Merry and Mighty Christmas to you and your family, and thank you for doing the show, and your book is brilliant, so I appreciate you very much.
Thank you so much. It's great to be with you.
You bet. Abdu Murray's been my guest. His book is Fake ID, How AI and Identity Ideology Are Collapsing Reality and What to Do About It. You can learn more about Abdu at embracethetruth.org. After a short break, Pastor Walter Hill is going to talk about John chapter 1. Can't wait. Be right back. Thanks for listening. Programming like this is made available through your support. Information available at myfaithradio.com.